That fella couldn't do anything. He couldn't even kneel to pray. And he got saved. Are you saved? That fella couldn't join the church. He couldn't join the church. He couldn't get baptized. He couldn't get baptized. He woke up with God. He woke up with the devil. Are you saved? So that fella didn't take the sacraments, didn't take the sacraments. Didn't say the rosary, didn't take the rosary. Didn't tithe, didn't tithe. He went to heaven, he went to hell. You saved? Didn't keep the law, he didn't keep the law. He broke the commandments, he broke the commandments. He didn't keep the golden rule, he didn't keep the golden rule. He woke up in glory, he woke up in the pit. Are you saved? You're saved. If you're not saved, you're over here or you're over here. You sure ain't in the middle. He said, Lord, remember me, thou comest thy kingdom. And Jesus turned to him and said, verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be saved. It's like that. You have been saved? If you ever saved, you were saved like that.
All right. In this video, I want to just digest all this information I've been looking at and make a video to help me better understand and hopefully help other people understand, and maybe I'll trigger something and somebody can help me out with this as well. Because I've been taking all this information here, trying to lay out when Jesus was born, when he was crucified, the start of the last days, as in the last 2,000 years, because it's 1,000 years for a day. When did that start? And take all that information and see what we can come up with. So, one of the first things I did was I actually looked up in Stellarium. I'm pretty sure I spelled that wrong. I'm not even sure how it's spelled, but it's Stellarium. I went and looked and found the Star of Bethlehem, and it appears in the years 3 and 2 BC. So it stayed up for a while, which explains the wise men from the east following it. And they appeared to follow it for about 2 years. And they arrived to meet Jesus when he was around 2 years old. That's why Herod, who died somewhere between 4 and 1 BC from the records that I've looked up, the earliest was 4 BC, the latest is in 1 BC. He ordered that all the children that are male, that are 2 years and younger, be killed. Right? And the reason why it was 2, because that would be the age of Jesus by the time that the wise men got to Bethlehem. So I was looking at that information there and looked up when Caesar Augustus decided to tax the world. And they said that this was between 3 and 2 BC, which aligns up with Stellarium, where it says the Star of Bethlehem was, and Jesus was born. And I looked up when Cyrenius was governor of Syria, and the records show that it was between 14 BC and 4 BC when he was first governor, and he became governor again later on around 6 AD, and that's why in Luke chapter 2, I believe it's chapter 2, where he tells us that it was when Cyrenius was first governor. So not the second time he was governor, but when he was first governor. So around this time here, we have when Jesus was born. So we have between 4 and 3 BC, we have Jesus born, and this was around the 7th month on the Jewish calendar. So it would be in the fall, around the time of Tabernacles. And on the 8th day of Tabernacles that year, let's just go with 3 BC. We have Jesus being circumcised in the temple, which would be the 8th day of Tabernacles, and the 8th day of his life, and that would line up pretty well there. But again, it could have happened in the fall of 4 BC. Right? But we're going to start by just picking up one of the years, and we're going to go from there, right? So one of the things we got to take into consideration is when you go from BC to AD, apparently you have to add a year, right? So you'd think, okay, 3 BC to 2 BC is 1 year, and then to 1 BC is 1 year, and then you would think, oh yeah, 1 year to jump to 180. But apparently that's 2. I'm not sure how that works, because there was no 0 year. So if there's no 0 year, shouldn't it just jump? But I don't know how the switch happened. Maybe somebody can help me out with that. So if we use 3 BC, then when we get to 180, just so when we're finally into our side of the timeline here, Jesus would be about 4 years old, right? Because it's 2 BC, 1 BC, 1 AD, but apparently there's another year in there. So he would be 4 years old at 1 AD, right? And we're told in the scriptures that he was about 30 years old when he was baptized, which makes sense because if he was born at Tabernacles right before he turns 30, we would have a Pentecost, which is not the Feast of Weeks. It's another feast, and my pen's skipping a lot, but I'm trying to write Pentecost there. And he would have been baptized at this time at about, if he was 4 years old there at 1 AD, I didn't put the D in there. Add 26 years, so about 27 AD. And I'm sorry that this is skipping a lot more than normal. He would be just about right before he turns 30 at Pentecost. So like a couple months before then, he is baptized by John the Baptist. And then, sorry about that. Then he starts his ministry, which lasts about 3.5 years, right? So if you add the 3.5 years to this, it brings you to 31 AD, right? But we know that he was not crucified at the beginning of that, so he wasn't crucified in the fall, but into the spring, which we know would trigger this to end up being 32 AD. Right? Because we're going by starting in the fall. And we know, but from the fall until we get to the spring when he was crucified at Passover, another year on the calendar, on the Gregorian calendar, would have passed. Right? So it appears right there in the the spring of 32 AD is when we have the crucifixion. And a lot of people agree with this here. But when did the 2,000 years start for the last days? Was it when he was born? When he was baptized? When he was crucified? Well, Acts 2 gives us a good reason to start at the Pentecost of that same year. So let's just do a little smidgen here, another dot here. Just a little while after this, Pentecost, where people say it's the birth of the church. In Acts chapter 2, Peter says that this is what was prophesied of in the last days. God's going to pour out his Spirit upon all people, right? Paraphrasing there. So that's a good sign to let us know that's when the 2,000 years start. Right? So if we go from there, we know that the calendar has been changed. So we don't know exactly how much time we would say would be added or removed. But we know that years couldn't be removed. Right? You can't just remove a year, let alone multiple years. I can understand there being days off, weeks off, even months off. Kind of like the calendar God uses compared to the calendar the Jews use and the calendar that the world uses. Roughly they're in the same year, but they're off by generally a month or two or some weeks, right? So to be off by years just doesn't seem realistic to me. I don't understand how you could possibly lose years or even a year, right? So if that's when the start of the 2,000 years would be, well then we come over here to (2032 AD) and add again, this would be Pentecost, right? If we're going to do it right when it starts, and we're going to put it right exact, then at Pentecost 2032 AD is when, we'll put X here, the last days are up. And yeah, that's that. Right? So what do we do with this information here? Well, we take it that 2032 AD, Pentecost, by that time, something happens. Right? That's a big year. But from there, let's shrink this down just a little bit here. We got to figure out what this means here. Right? Because we think, oh, this is when, since Jesus went up, this is when he comes back down. Right? Which is very much possible. Right? And there's reason to believe that he would return at the fall feasts, maybe around the time of, let's say, the Feast of Trumpets, or even at Atonement or Tabernacles. Let's just go with the Feast of Trumpets because it's at the beginning of the 7th month, which makes sense that he's coming down for the 7th day for the Sabbath rest of 1,000 years. So let's just do that because the 7s line up, right? So he comes back and it's at Trumpets in this year, 2032, right? So if we were to go back 7 years, well, we know we get 2025, right? So let's just take it year by year so we know, right? So you can use your hand here. You got 2031 is 1 year, 2030 2 years, 2029 3 years, 2028 4 years, 2027 5 years, 2026 6 years, 2025 7 years. So we've already passed this time of the 7-year tribulation starting right when the rapture happens, right? So if this is correct, then we should already be gone, right? But we're still here. So that means either we have all this timing wrong, or maybe we got what 2032 is wrong. Because it can mean two other things, if you ask me. It may not be the time he actually returns. Right? This could obviously represent the end of the last days, the last 2 days before the millennial reign. But just because the millennial reign has started doesn't mean it starts when Jesus lands on the earth. That millennial reign can start while he is still in heaven. Right? Because in Revelation chapters 4 and 5, we read about the Lamb opening the seals, which is basically the deed to everything. Right? So he's opening it up, showing, I'm worthy to open it. I have redeemed everything. It's mine. Right? He's taking what he has redeemed. He's claiming it as his own. Right? So in heaven, by the time he finishes opening those seals, he's already regained dominion. Right? So 2032 could actually be something like not when Jesus actually comes down, but let's say 3.5 years into the 7-year time of Jacob's trouble. Which would lead us to, minusing 3.5 years from that, we're going to go with trumpets again in 2032. And you take away 3 years, you go 2031, 2030, 2029. The fall of 2029 minus a half a year brings you to the spring of 2029, right? And that's a possibility, right? So let's just put that there, 2029, spring. That could be what that means there. But there's something else 2032 could mean. That could mean that's the start of everything. Because again, when they have the first seal being opened, a crown is given to the Antichrist. Well, that's probably what's going on with Jesus. He's receiving the crown where he is claiming everything that he's redeemed. But the Antichrist is doing a counterfeit here in the physical world while that is going on. Right? So, 2032, right about the time of the Feast of Trumpets, probably around Pentecost from what I'm putting together here, that could be when the rapture happens. So it could be spring 2029 or more of the summer of 2032. And that does not look cool. That does not look fun. But it's like I've been saying, where the world looks like it's coming to an end. It's how can it keep going? But somehow it keeps going. Right? We're kind of like, how does it keep going? I don't know. Why hasn't it collapsed yet? How hasn't the dollar not collapsed? How's the economy not collapsed? How has the world not gone into just world war? If somehow it keeps going. So it's quite possible that it keeps going and we're not taken out until around the spring of 2029 or the summer of 2032. But I can't quite determine what 2032 is really about, because if it is when Jesus returns and he returns after a 7-year tribulation, why are we still here? Right? Why are we still here? maybe it doesn't mean what we think it means. But then again, maybe things are off by more than just months. Maybe it is off by a year or so, right? I don't know. I really don't. Because maybe it ties into the whole once you go past AD, you add a year kind of thing. That doesn't quite fit. But I don't know. But all I know is that if it's when he returns, why are we still here? We obviously got something off here. Right? We obviously got something off. And I mean, we can shift things a little bit. Right? But we don't have a lot of room to do that. But we can do some little things like take a look at John chapter 10, for example, where Jesus goes to the temple on the Feast of Dedication, which is what we know as Hanukkah. And in John chapter 10, when he's there on that feast, he actually declares himself to be God in the temple. And I believe that the Antichrist would do the same thing at the same time. Right? So if we come down here for a second, and we put Hanukkah, or the Feast of Dedication, and we say that that is the midpoint. Right, we got a midpoint here. If we put that to 2032 AD, or 3.5 years before that, I should say, then we could possibly be going this year at Hanukkah. And again, Israel, the Hebrews, the Jews right now, they're a month early. So don't get too excited when they start talking about Hanukkah, because I mentioned it here. But there's traditions of Enoch being raptured on, I think, the 7th day of Hanukkah. That's when he went up. So, yeah. If this, again, this is when the Antichrist will claim to be the God in the temple. If we take that from 32 AD, like 3.5 years before that, right? Because we're assuming Jesus is going to come back in 2032. If we go 3.5 years before that, we're going to go to the spring of 2029, right? And that means that we either have to push back into the winter of 2028 to go to Hanukkah, or we push to the winter of 2029 to get to Hanukkah, right? So let's just say stay in 2029 here, and let's say we go to the winter there, and that's when we have the midpoint, when the Antichrist claims to be God in the temple. So the winter of 2029, which kind of lines up with the Apophos dream that Tom Horn had, or his vision, where he talked about that being the midpoint there. I'm not saying he's right and what he saw was true, but it very well could be. So if we go from there, the winter of 2029, if we go back 3.5 years from that, well, we got 2028, 2027, 2026. So the winter of 2026 minus a half a year would bring us to around the summer of 2026. Right? And this is if we're just stretching things. Like I told you, we got some wiggle room. So the summer of 2026 is about 6 months before the winter, right? It's like spring, summertime. And that adds up lining up pretty closely with Pentecost, which is not the Feast of Weeks, right? And when we look at it this way, what I've been saying since, 2022, 2023, so I've been saying it for the last 2 to 4 years, roughly. I've been saying the earliest the rapture could happen and the latest it could happen, from what I understand of everything I'm putting together. This is looking at things from a different angle, so this is kind of like a second witness to what I've been saying, just using Matthew 24 and the fig tree prophecy. I was saying that the earliest would be in I can't remember if it was the spring or fall of 2024, but I think it was the fall of 2024. I was saying this is the earliest we could go, and the latest would be spring, potentially the summer of 2026. And then I was saying if it doesn't happen by this time, then I have no idea, right? And I know people don't like date setting and all that. And that's why I was like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to pick a month. I'm not going to pick a day or what have you. I'm going to go for a year. And I did my best to figure out the year, and I couldn't really pin down a year. I was like, it could happen somewhere between 2024 and 2026, which when you put this together, it's about, a year and a half, 2 years? I know it encompasses 3 years, but it's only half of 2024 and half of 2026. So it's like a 2 year period here where I was saying this is when it should happen, in this time. I don't know when. I don't know if it's going to happen on an appointed time, on an appointed feast day, or on some random day, right? That we just don't know, we don't understand. But putting all this information together, it looks again that the latest is the spring, potentially summer of 2026. And again, like I've been saying for the past few years, whenever I bring this up, if I'm wrong here and we're in the winter of 2026, I'm not going to be setting new dates. I have not set any dates or years other than this. And I basically did this because people were setting dates. And I was like, hey, stop focusing on a day. How about you just focus on a year, right? And that's why I ended up doing this, right? So that when all these people were saying, it could be this day, it could be this day. And yeah, and it was like, it could be that day, but not this year, right? That's what I would always say. Well, not this year, because it's not in this window here. But now that we're in this window, well, then I could say it happened anytime. But then again, like I said, if we're past this time that I'm saying here, so with the winter of 2026, if, it's December 2026, I'm obviously wrong, right? But I just wanted to show you all this, to show you my line of thinking. And I admit that, hey, I could be off. I don't know if this is true. I'm not giving you a thus saith the Lord. I'm not saying I'm a prophet. I'm just trying to put all this together. And from what I put together, like I talked about also with Matthew 24 about the fig tree generation, that it's like the spring, summer of 2026. If you really push it, that's the latest it could happen. Right? And that's if you're really just stretching it to the furthest point that you could go. Right? And after that, The fig tree thing doesn't make sense. The last days point doesn't make sense. All this stuff is just kind of out the window, right? And it leads you to think that maybe the tribulation starts at the beginning of the millennial reign. So that maybe it's sometime here, 2029, 2032. There I go, setting other years. But I know I'm kind of encouraging you, but at the same time, I want to discourage you, right? Like, hey, it could be as soon as this spring, this summer that's coming up. But at the same time, if it's not, well, the next best bet in my view would be we have to wait till 2029, some spring, summer of 2029. And if that's not the case, then I would say, well, it's around the summer, fall of 2032. And then if that's not right, just plan to stay here until you die, right? Because I after that, there doesn't seem to be any logical conclusion to this. But I know I'm going to irritate some people because I'm setting dates, even though it's just a year's, and I guess the seasons. But I know that's going to irritate some people. But you see, I want to know. I want to know, and we may not know, but hey, it would be nice, right? It would be nice. So you can plan accordingly. Not that you should sell all your stuff, but at least, you strive to be like, all right, I just got to make it this much further, right? But all in all, to wrap this up, I would still say that I have never made a timing prediction of anything before. I'm just pausing real quick to make sure I haven't. So, there's no reason to believe I have anything correct here, right? I don't claim to have been given the gift of prophecy and being told the future, and I'm giving you a thus saith the Lord. I'm just taking the information, and like I said, I'm kind of thinking out loud, putting things together in this video to help myself digest all this. Right? This is kind of like a rough draft of everything. It's not, hey, this is for certainty, right? Don't go sell all your stuff saying that I told you we're going home this spring, summer, right? Because I did not say that. I'm saying, hey, if I got things correct, that's the latest it would be. And after that, it just doesn't seem to make sense any other time, right? Potentially these other dates, because we have the 2032 and what that means. We got that all messed up. But yeah, this could all be nothing, right? So don't get your hopes all up, because again, I have never made any other prediction before concerning any kind of times. So I can't tell you, oh yeah, I did this before and I got it right, or I did it before and it was wrong. I haven't done anything like this trying to calculate a timing of an event. So, as far as I know, this is way off, right? But at the same time, for all I know, I'm on to something. All right? I don't know. I'm in the same boat you are. Where I want to know, I want to get excited, but at the same time, I don't want to get my hopes up. I've seen all these people who got their hopes up and they get torn down, especially this past year over the fall, right? Over people talking about the Feast of Trumpets and all that. And they all came crashing down, right? But anyway, hopefully you take a look at this with a grain of salt, think about it. Don't take it to heart. It was more of one of those things I wanted to bounce off all of you to see what you got to say about it. And if you think, hey, you shouldn't even bother trying to figure it out, all right, I'm still going to try, right? And if that bothers you, okay, it bothers you. But yeah, if you think that there's a logical reason why this is wrong, let me know. If you think there's things to add to this where, hey, you might be onto something, please share that as well. But again, it is what it is. To me, while doing this video, it just looked like a second witness to what I've been saying for years. That this is the window, and it looks like it's about to close. So if we don't go at this time, things are a little off. All right, I don't know what I'm talking about. Or maybe we're all off about what 2032 actually means. Right? But if you go back and look at my videos about Matthew 24, the fig tree generation, it looks like everything about the abomination desolation has to happen around 2029. By 2029. Right? So, if that's when it's going to happen, right, by the winter of 2029, well, then we got to be going pretty soon. Right at the end of my window here. So, it's another witness. If I get a third witness to line up to this, then I might start to get a little bold and then really irritate people. Where I might start going saying, you know what, I'm getting ready. Right? Then people will be like, you're setting dates. And I'll be like, yeah, I'm sorry. But I got 3 witnesses. You show me how these witnesses are wrong. Right? Show me how they're off. And how I'm full of the baloney. Right? And then I will shut up about it. But there seems to be something to this. There really does. So if you think, I'm sorry that I keep rambling on here, but I know there's people who are going to backlash at this. And I don't blame you for it. I'm not upset about it. But if you're going to do it, you're going to tell me, hey, I shouldn't be setting dates. Okay. Just do me a solid here. Show me how this makes no sense. And what I talked about Matthew 24. Show me how that is off and doesn't make sense. Because if those 2 things, you can't show me how they are wrong, well then, I think that's just validating this a bit more. Just saying. All right, if I present evidence and you can't disprove it, why am I just going to throw it out the window? Just because people don't like it when you set dates. I think it's a reasonable request. So with all that being said, thank you for your time and attention. I'm going to let this go to my splice video. Take care.
Alright, it's the end of the video. And I figured I would do an ending segment to my video so I don't have to keep repeating myself. But I do want to remind you to do what Isaiah said to do and seek out the book of the Lord and read it, putting line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little, doing what Paul said, and studying the word, showing yourself approved unto God, rightly dividing the word of truth. And if you read English, that would be the KJV. And then do what John has Jesus recorded telling the Church of Philadelphia, and keep his word, preserve it, protect it, hide it in your hearts, and not deny his name. And then Jesus will never be able to tell you do err not knowing the scriptures, and he will keep you from the hour of temptation, which is going to come upon all those that dwell upon the earth here shortly. And with that being said, I'd like to ask you for your support. You watching the video all the way to the end helps out a lot, but if you could like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, share the video, share the channel, interact in the comments section. These things help out a lot, especially with people telling me that their likes are not being registered, that they get unsubscribed, and all kinds of other ways being shadow banned. Your help in this way was greatly appreciated. And if you're able to give me a little bit more time and pray to our Heavenly Father that He keeps this ministry going and He uses it to reach those who He wants to reach, to get the truth out to the world, to make it a bright light, and to feed His sheep, to feed His children, and even to bring forth more children, and that He would watch over all of us, His born-again believers, and take care of us, provide for us, and protect us, even after He comes and gets us, which looks like it's going to be real soon. And just to amen in Jesus' name to that should be all we need. But if you could help out some more, I know times are rough and they look like they're getting rougher, but if you're able to support financially, there's a few ways you can do so in the info description box, such as PayPal, Venmo, and there's a couple other ways you can support if you so choose to do so, which would make sure I can keep this ministry going longer than the foreseeable future, because this kind of support has been drying up there. It's pretty much non-existent lately. So if you could help out in that way, it would be greatly appreciated to make sure I can keep doing this. But if you could at least pray, I know God will provide. And sometimes it's a change of ministry, so maybe it won't be a ministry online anymore. But hey, if you want to keep seeing this stuff, pray. And with all that being said, thank you so much again for your time and attention, for watching this video all the way through. I appreciate it. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one, and may God bless you and yours.